Welcome to this mini lecture on space occupying lesions in the thorax. We're going to do this from my shed because I've got a friend to help me there. Well, welcome to my shed so that we can get my friend here from my cupboard so we can talk more effectively about space occupying lesions within the thorax and how different positions of the lesion can have different clinical presentations. Let's go to the clinical scenario. So we've got Farmer Brown. He's a 57-year-old male. He's a smoker since the age of 13. He's got that typical smoker's cough. He had a change in the tone of his voice, and recently been getting pain in his right chest and shoulder and right arm. And he started having to wear braces because he'd been losing weight for no reason. Not as much as my friend here has. Clinically, when you examine him, he looks tired and unwell. He's got a deep hoarse voice. He's got a fullness in the supraclavicular fossa on the right hand side. And he's got wasting and weakness of the intrinsic muscles of his right hand. And here's his chest x-ray. Here's the space occupying lesion in the apex of his right lung, right? And I'm sure you're all thinking, well, he's a smoker, he's lost weight, he's unwell, he's got a mass in his supraclavicular fossa, and you've got a chest x-ray which shows a mass there as well. So we're concerned that he's got some form of lung cancer. Let's have a look at the other symptoms he's got rather than just the mass and he's generally feeling unwell. So how are we going to explain this deep hoarse voice? Well, it could be a structural change in the larynx itself, or it could be a functional change in the larynx. His tumour is then in the apex of his lung at the base of his neck. So there's no way that that can cause a structural change in the larynx, which is up here. So there's got to be a functional change in the larynx itself. And so that functional change could be due to the disruption in the innervation of the larynx. And that's predominantly done by the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which innervates the intrinsic muscles of the larynx. If they can tense, they can put the vocal cords under tension and increase the pitch of our voice. If they can't contract, if they're not being innervated properly, the vocal cords are going to be relaxed and you get that deeper tone like the big bass strings of a bass guitar compared to the taut, tight strings of a violin. But why is it called the recurrent laryngeal nerve? The laryngeal bit's easy, it innervates the larynx. But why recurrent? I'll give you a clue. I've gone away and I've come back. And the same thing happens to the recurrent laryngeal nerve. It goes away and it recurs. It goes down into the chest and comes back into the neck. But why does it do that? Here's your next clue. Yes, it's all down to us being a little bit like fish when we're those tiny embryos developing in your mother's womb. And if we look slightly more detail at the blood supply of a fish, so you can see from the diagram early on in fetal life, we look a bit like fish, or our vascular system looks a bit like fish. We've got two dorsal aortas and all these branchial arches coming off it. And the heart starts life early on in the embryo relatively high up here in the neck, very close to the larynx. So the innervation of the heart and the larynx is coming through in various different branchial arches and the vascular supply to it. As the heart descends down into the chest, some of those nerves coming off the vagus get caught around those branchial arches. On the right hand side, it gets caught out by the persistent branchial arch which forms the right subclavian to the right upper limb, which is a branch of the brachiocephalic on this right hand side. On the left hand side, however, because the heart's descended down to the chest and that major vessel coming off the heart towards that right hand side is the arch of the aorta, on the left hand side the recurrent laryngeal nerve comes down into the chest, hooks around the arch of the aorta and goes back up into the neck. They're both recurrent. On the right hand side it's just hooking around the subclavian artery, on the left hand side it's hooking around the arch of the aorta. Now why has Farmer Brown got hoarseness on his voice? Well, that tumour in the apex of the lung on this right hand side is pressing up into the base of the neck, and as we know that subclavian artery comes off across the apex of the lung over the first rib to get to the upper limb, and as that recurrent laryngeal nerve is just inferior to it, right up against the apex of the lung, a tumour invading into that recurrent laryngeal nerve can give you palsy, and we lose a function of the larynx and a hoarseness of the voice. So we're getting there with Farmer Brown, haven't we? He looks tired and unwell because he's got a cancer. He's got a deep hoarse voice because of that recurrent laryngeal nerve going around the right subclavian. He's got that fullness in the right clavicular fossa because it's the mass there. What about the wasting of the intrinsic muscles of his right hand? Well, I can hear you groaning from here about the site of the brachial plexus, but it is relevant. We know the brachial plexus goes from C5 down to T1, so the lowest portion is T1, nerve roots. The myotome for the T1 nerve root is the intrinsic muscle of the hand itself. So a tumour invading from the apex up into the brachial plexus, which sits across this apex of the lung, can then get loss of function of the T1 myotome. And you're also going to get that pain and discomfort radiating into the T1 dermatome as well. It might even go higher up into C8. But we'll see in Farmer Brown that all the intrinsic muscles of the hand, innervated by both the ulnar and median nerve, will be wasted and have a loss of function. So we've covered all those symptoms and signs for Farmer Brown, including the weakness of the intrinsic muscles of the hand due to T1 nerve root involvement of the brachial plexus. Now actually you've gone through all that lot, and on closer inspection you notice that he's actually got some drooping of the right upper eyelid and loss of sweating on the right side of the face. Can you work out what's going on there? Difficult question. I feel sympathetic for you. Yes, I apologise about the poor dad joke, but it is all about the sympathetic innervation of the head and neck, and that's coming from the sympathetic chain. The sympathetic chain sits either side of our vertebral column, with our nerve roots coming out from T1 down to L2, but we've got to get innervation from our thoracic vertebrae up into our neck. And at the top of the sympathetic chain we've got something called the stellate ganglion, which is a large connection of those nerves, and then gives it off the sympathetic drive up into the head and neck. Well, what's the sympathetic drive in the head and neck? Well, remember the sympathetic is all about fighting, fright and frolic. And in the head and neck, if we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, we want to get as much light in our eyes as possible, so the smooth muscle of the component of the levator palpebrae will be more innervated by the sympathetic nervous system, so your eyes are wide open, you're so frightened you see the whites of their eyes. We want to get as much light into the pupil as well, so the pupil will dilate. In other words, because you get more light into the pupil itself. And also you see people, they sort of sweat with fear as well, because we want to be able to cool ourselves down. So we get sweating of that. Now in Farmer Brown's case, that innervation's been taken away. And because it's been taken away, that eyelid on the right hand side will droop because it hasn't got that sympathetic drive, because the stellate ganglion's been invaded. The pupil itself, you'll look at his pupil and it be constricted because we've lost that sympathetic drive, so we're not trying to dilate our pupil upwards. And you're going to get a loss of sweating because again that's a sympathetic drive. So we've got Farmer Brown sorted with his bright apical tumour. Well, let's say it's a really unlucky family and his twin brother has got the same tumour but on the left apex. Would all his symptoms and signs be exactly the same? Well, they would, apart from the hoarseness of his voice. Because where does the recurrent laryngeal nerve go on that left hand side? If you remember on our fish analogy, the heart starting up in the neck and being drawn down into the chest, the left recurrent laryngeal nerve is recurring around the arch of the aorta, right the way low down in the chest. So, where would the tumour need to be on the left hand side to give you hoarseness for the voice? What does the arch of the aorta arch over on that left hand side? Well, it's the hilum of the left lung. So a tumour in the left hilar region will invade into that recurrent laryngeal nerve on the left hand side and give you hoarseness of the voice. But because the tumour's down here, you won't get any involvement of the stellate ganglion, so you won't lose any sympathetic drive, and it's a long, long way away from your brachial plexus, so you won't get any intrinsic muscles of the hand wasting away. So, when you're investigating someone with hoarseness of their voice and you suspect a recurrent laryngeal nerve palsy, make sure you do a chest x-ray. You're going to look at the right apex, because on the right hand side it's just going around the right subclavian. You're going to look at the left hilum, because on the left hand side the recurrent laryngeal is being drawn right the way down to the chest and going around the arch of the aorta. Also, don't forget, apical lesions can involve the brachial plexus and also the stellate ganglion, and you get those symptoms and signs associated with that. I hope that's been useful. I need to get my friend back in the closet. Well, let's get you back in the cupboard, shall we? I don't know, can't get the help nowadays.